And welcome back. Now, we're going to talk today about pivot tables. Why do people care about pivot tables? Why, when you pull up the job description, does everybody want to know, can you do a pivot table? What is this mystical thing and why do people actually care? So, I went ahead and made a data set, and I actually have not looked at this data set, so we're going to do it live together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you can really quickly analyze a very large data set here. Now there's like about 50 rows here, but it wouldn't matter. There could be 500,000 rows. We could still do the same thing. And you can just quickly see exactly what's going on. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the whole data set here. Now notice that I'm definitely going to include the headers here because this will allow us to use them as labels going forward. So I'm going to select everything. I'm going to press Alt. We're going to go to Insert tab. We're going to press Pivot Table. We're going to do from this table in range. Okay. Now it's going to access, do you want to do it to a new worksheet? If I just press Enter, it's just going to automatically make a new cell here. So this just made a new workbook, a new tab, I mean. So if we go over here, here's our new tab, and I can just rename this. Let's just call this our pivot tab. Okay. So when you've made a pivot table, if you look, I'm clicking around here. When I click on this pivot table field will show up. Okay. If I click out, this will go away. If I click back here, it'll show back up. And if you're ever not able to figure that out, just go to, I think it's the design tab or the actually it's the pivot table analyze tab. If you're not having this show up, you can find that here. But anyways, I'm gonna go back to the pivot table. So if you look here, you see filters, columns, rows, and values, and you see all of the labels up top. So what we got to figure out is what do we want to do here? Well, the first thing that we can do is we can just look at our data set. So what do we have? Well, we have some regions. We have FICO grouping numbers that could be interesting. We have FICO scores. We have loan amount, purchase price. So right off the top, one thing which will probably be interesting is when you have this numerical data here, this is usually going to show up in your values. So we know that the loan amount and the purchase price are probably going to be things we want to look at in the values. We also know that data like region and your FICO grouping number, that's another categorization here. That just means are you between, 640, it just groups 761 to 769 or something into 770, right? So this is just a grouping for you. Now, these categorizations are going to make it easier for us to look at the data set. Now, if you have dates, one thing I recommend is usually you would want your dates to be in the column here. But since we don't, let's start off by using the FICO grouping. Okay, so as you can see, it just spreads out all the way up here to 800. Okay, now that's a little bit, that's a big data set. Let me see if I can zoom out a little bit. All right, so that's a little bit more manageable. So as we can see, all of the groupings are going out to the right here. Let's add in a couple of things. Let's just look at the purchase price and the loan amount. So if I add in the purchase price, okay, this is the sum, and let's add in the loan amount. Okay, so let's do it like this. So I don't like how that's looking right now. So let's do this. If I take the FICO grouping, see how it's kind of weird? So I'm going to move the FICO grouping to here, and boom, look how nice that is. So I'm going to change this format real quick. I'm going to change that to accounting style, Alt HK, Alt H9 to get rid of the zeros. And what do we see? Well, we see that this purchase price seems to be kind of all over the place, but it's definitely highest at 800 here. And we see some levels where the purchase price got a little bit higher. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. It's probably hard to look at. But you see right here, that's very high, that's very high, that's very high, that's very high. So you have the sum of the purchase price is high here. So what I'm interested in real quick is I wonder how many homes are actually in here. So I can re-add, I'm going to add in purchase price again, but I'm going to make a new column this time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to notice how it's the third position here and it's the third position here. And when you add it in a second time, it's now sum of purchase price too. Let's change this to value field. So let's change this to count. Okay, so if I move that over, so now we see, okay, well, what happened here is that there's 5 loans at 680 and there's 5 loans at 800. So now we say, oh, okay, well, looking at the sum of the purchase price doesn't really make sense because you're not accounting for how many loans are in each bracket. So let's change this up. Let's make this, let's try the average. Okay, so now we try the average and look at that. That actually is a lot more pleasant to look at. So we can get rid of the purchase price here. And we want to get rid of something, just drag it out. Boom, it's gone. Okay, so what do we notice? Down here, you have some pretty small purchase numbers like 360,000. And then as you get closer to 700, now we're increasing in our purchase price, but it's still not necessarily that much higher. And then it starts getting higher here. So you see the overall trend of the purchase price is going up. Now we know that this average is good. Let's also throw in the average for the loan amount here because we don't want that. So we're going to change that preemptively to average. And this makes sense as well, right? That the average loan amount is going up as the credit grouping is going up as well. Okay, so that kind of makes sense. Let's see if we can add in a little bit more, a little bit more here. So let's go back here to the data set. What do we also want to look at? Well, how about we look at region? So I'm going to go back here. Let me see if I can throw in region. So let me try putting it in rows. Okay, when I put it in rows here, it doesn't really look too good. What's going on is it's I'll do this better. When you go to design tab, my favorite layout is tabular. And we can get rid of the grand totals and get rid of the subtotals. Okay. And then what it does, it says, okay, within 590, there's a central loan and a west loan. And then here's the averages, right? Within 600, here are the 3 regions, here are the breakouts. And if you want, you can repeat all item labels. That way you can always tell it's 590, 600. When you only have 3 items, it doesn't matter. But if there's 70 items within each one, then it can actually matter here. But we're going to change this up. So let's take the region. Let's put it in the columns this time. Okay. So now we have it in the columns. Now we have a kind of a more interesting view here. So let's just look at this for a second. I'm going to get rid of the average loan amount for now, just to make this a little bit easier to look at. All right. And I want to put back on the grand totals here. So I'm going to go back to design and let's get the grand totals. Okay. So what we see here is that, let's see, Central and East. International seems to have the lowest. West has the highest. Okay. But we don't want average purchase price here because we're adding in the region. Well, no, let's keep the average. That's my mistake. Okay. So can we see any trends here? I'm not getting too much trends here. Oh, no, you do see the credit score does seem to be the main driver. And, I'm kind of getting a little carried away with the analysis here as if I was doing this for my job. But basically, what I'm trying to show you is just different ways you can split out the data set. So notice how we have the FICO grouping here, we have the regions here, we have the average purchase price in here, which we can change to the sum and we can add in other things, right? So you can get a ton of information from here. Um, and this is just a really solid way to figure out what's going on. And let's change it up. So I'm like, okay, well, I know. Let's get rid of the region for now. You just say, well, I know that the average purchase price is correlated with the FICO grouping. That makes sense. Let's try something else. So we're gonna get rid of all this, get rid of all this, starting from blank. Let's look at the regions. I'm gonna put the regions right here. Okay, cool. So now what I want to know is what is the average FICO score? So come here, value field settings. What's the average FICO score? Okay, pretty close here, but international is actually the lowest and the West has the highest here. That's really interesting. What can we also grab? Well, let's grab the purchase price. Let's grab the purchase price. Oh, purchase price is also higher here. Let's throw in purchase price one more time. Let's get the average this time, right? So you see, interesting, even though the FICO score is lower in international, they actually have a higher purchase price, right? And then we can throw in the loan amount. Let's get the average loan amount. Okay, and you see international has the lowest loan amount here. So, you know, you can take this data set, you can split it out by region, and you can get all of these regional metrics. Or you can break it out by FICO score like we were doing, and you can get all of those metrics, right? We can even, let's see, we can go one more for, so by the way, you can just click on this, that's how you can get rid of all that. If we go to loan amount, no, that won't be good. So it wouldn't be good. I can just tell you why I did that. So if I threw in loan amount here, it'll throw out every single loan, and because it's not bracketed, that won't really be a good analysis. So you want to stick with more categorical data when you're doing your groupings. But it's important to note that a really good look that you can do is if you have your FICO score and regions like we were doing. These are some really good looks if you're trying to kind of dissect the data. If you're trying to say, well, okay, everything below 600 in central, what's going on, right? You can really get a quick analysis of what's going on with your data set. And the last thing to note is that when it comes to design, I think tabular is by far the best layout. I would always go with tabular. If you want to repeat the item labels, that can make it easier to see, and I usually take off the subtotals. Those are my preferences, though, and that shouldn't really affect your analysis.